started getting money, living lavish in the stool every day. I done turned into a habit. Man, I had to make it happen. When I first started rapping, they said it would never happen. Poof, making money like it's magic. Every time I hop up on a beat, I turn it to a classic. These little boys screaming that they want a static. When I pull up, tell me why they started panic. Run it up, run it up.
Welcome back to another episode of Different by the Four. This is season 4. I told you about the clap. How you guys doing out there? My name is Kyra. I'll be your host. And with me, I have Urban and I have Kay.
Hello.
With us today, we have a very special guest. We have Ashil with us.
What's up, fellas? Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Wow.
So before we start the show, do you want to tell the viewers out there about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Ashil. I work in mental health. I've been working in mental health, or in the helping field as I call it, since 2011. So it's been a little over 10 years. Currently, I work at a nonprofit. I oversee a couple programs, and then I also work as a mental health therapist as well.
Okay. So, all right. Again, before we start off the show, thank you guys for subscribing. Turn on post notifications, all that. It helps us out a lot. Keep buying your fall merch. We do it for you guys. So, to get the show started, what made you want to work into the mental health department?
For me personally, my road to mental health and working in this field was a journey, I would say. It took me a little while to figure it out. I'm Haitian. I went to college, and when you go to college and you're Haitian parents expect you to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. So I went the doctor route. I wanted to be a pediatrician when I first started college. Quickly realized during freshman year that it was not really what I wanted to do. No drive, no passion. Really was down in my mood while I was at school. So I had to figure out what was next. During my sophomore year, changed my major. I played sports in high school, so I figured let me try athletic training. Tried that. That didn't work. But what I did do was try to do job shadowing. And that's how I figured out I didn't want to do athletic training. It was through an internship in psychology that I said, let me just try it because I like the psychology course. That really opened up my eyes to this field being the field that I need to work in. I was able to work at a transitional home for women, between age, I want to say 16 to early 20s, who are homeless. They never had a male intern there or male staff ever there. So I'm walking in, nobody really trusted me. Nobody really was open to communicating with me at first. I think that by the time the internship ended, everybody was okay with me. Everybody was very comfortable. And I actually saw the impact I was able to make on those individuals. And it really validated to me that, okay, this is what I need to do. From there, I found myself a mentor and really figured out what steps to take to get into this field. And my mentor basically told me, you got to study mental health.
Okay. With that, you were out when you were interning and you were diagnosing people. What do you feel like is the best way to self-diagnose yourself if you feel like you might have a mental health problem?
Trick question. It's a trick question. Self-diagnosis, right? The way I approach it is we don't want individuals to almost like MedMD, the website where people can go, they can kind of read symptoms and figure out, okay, what's wrong with me? My back hurt, my head hurt. That's not what we're doing here when it comes to mental health. There are different assessment tools and appraisals that you can do online, questionnaires that can kind of give you a gauge of if you're dealing with anxiety or with depression. But in general, you're not looking to use those as a way to diagnose. Always trust a professional. Trust a mental health therapist, trust a psychiatrist, trust a psychologist, trust a clinical social worker. But don't approach it on your own because let's say you do have a diagnosis of depression. Is that something that now you're going to tackle on your own and you're going to try to solve and resolve on your own, or you're going to go and try to get some support? So self-appraisal and some self-assessment tools, it's definitely great to utilize just to get a little bit more awareness. But it's always best to utilize those when you have a game plan as far as, let me just find a therapist. That's always a good place to start.
So when it comes to people who all right, how do I want to ask this question? Okay, so when it comes to people who are diagnosed with depression or some other mental illness, do you recommend them and say they're stubborn or something, stubborn or very yeah, I can handle this myself. do you recommend, like, how do you deal with that? Like, do you recommend that they go get help, or do you like just ease like into?
You're talking about maybe somebody who's in your life, like personally, or you're
No,
talking like
just
me
like
as a therapist,
you as a
as if I'm approaching someone. And let's say, so me as a therapist, people usually come into me and there's usually some level of motivation. Only time I'm dealing with people who maybe aren't as motivated is if mom or dad is sending their teenager to come talk to me. So if I'm working with an adult, let's say, who's dealing with depression, right? A lot of people, they'll come to therapy and they're motivated to work things through in therapy because they want to avoid something else. Maybe sometimes, maybe it's, I don't want any pills. I don't want medication. I don't want this or that. I just want to get better. And they're coming and they're talking to me, right? And part of my job is to educate them on the diagnosis and to educate them on what they're experiencing and what they're feeling, help them to process some of their emotions. But if at any point I realize they need a little bit more than what I can provide, I have to recommend them to go to a different level of care. Through the therapeutic process, that's going to be over the time that we're, working together. That therapeutic alliance is built. They trust me. If I'm recommending, hey, you should probably go and get a psychiatric evaluation for medication as well, people are usually receptive to that. Now, on the flip side, working with maybe a teenager whose mom said you're going to counseling on Thursday, and then now they're sitting in my office, they don't really want to fully be there, right? It's a matter of understanding what is that barrier, what's that boundary, where are they at, and how do they see themselves, right? Meet them where they're at, because sometimes you can see very clearly what someone else is dealing with, and they themselves might be in denial. They may not be at a place where they're ready to address it, right? Something called the stages of change: pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action, maintenance, right? An individual who's at a pre-contemplative stage is somebody who's in denial. That's somebody who doesn't recognize that there's an issue, or they do know, but they're completely denying it, right? There's a lack of awareness there. You can't expect somebody who's in pre-contemplation to take any steps towards progress, right? So if you got somebody, there's a guy I follow on social media. He goes by Possible Pat on social media, but he tells his story about how he had to really take his health, physical health, into account and really prioritize it. He said that he realized at one point that he really was out of shape. He had no idea. And I say he was in the pre-contemplative stage because he really had no idea. It wasn't until he lost a bet, had to do push-ups, couldn't do a single push-up, that he realized something's wrong with me, right? And that's what moved him from pre-contemplation to contemplation. Once he was in contemplation, he started, okay, I got to figure something out. Something's wrong with me. I can't really figure it out. He went to the doctor, figured out he was over 400 pounds. The rest is history. He had to start planning, put that plan in action. Once that plan is in action for a while, it's maintenance, right? But sometimes we, as people who maybe support people, will walk into their situation based on what we see and what we assess, and we think, okay, well, we got to start planning. You got to, hit the gym. You got to talk to a therapist. You got to do this. You got to do that, right? But if they are not there in their mindset, they're not going to move.
Is there a way to basically show that person, hey, that, like, because you might say we start off in planning. Is there a way to get that person into pre-consultation, and then planning?
From pre-contemplation to contemplation, probably is where we want to move them to. It's a matter of insight and awareness, right? The best thing that we can do, right, is help individuals by listening, right? Listen to what they have to say. Listen to where they say they are. Because if you're talking to someone, right, and you see what you see and you're speaking to them based on what you've observed in that individual, right, you're not really hearing anything they have to say. You're going to approach them based on your own knowledge or based on your perception, right? But if you actually take a beat and just listen to what they have to say, right, and you're hearing them out and you hear what they have to say, you might realize, okay, they're not where I see them at, right? So let me meet them where they're at so that I can just, help them out, but offer the help that they're willing to receive, right? And sometimes that's just holding your hand out and that person grabs your hand and y'all just walking. Other times it's, they might actually tell you, like, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, but you kind of have to be at the liberty of that individual sometimes, right? We can't push people, because at the same time as you push them, if you'll find that you're speaking too much, you're talking too much, you're doing too much, and you can't want a change for an individual more than they want it for themselves.
Fair point. That's a real good point. I feel
I
like
got a two-part question.
Go ahead.
Let's say, based on age range, what would you say? You see a lot more younger people or a lot more older people?
It's a good mix. I feel like with me, over the years, it's kind of, there's been a consistency of seeing a lot of teens and a consistency of seeing a lot of men, and a lot of couples.
With the teens and the young men and couples, you believe that there's a lot of nah, I gotta phrase that down. With the young people, do you believe that there is an issue with the state of mental health in our young people like me these days? So I'm a part of that young group.
You're part of the young group.
oh yeah.
I think what happens, right? A lot of young people. Let's go from the teens. I work myself up, right? A lot of the teens that I work with, right? People are coming in because maybe their parents have observed something, and now they want their teen to be in counseling, right? So that's different in and of itself, right? Working with teens, usually the parents have to consent to services, have to consent to treatment, right? And they're coming. Usually, there's an issue in the home, or there might be an issue at school, or behavioral issue, or mood change, mood issues, right? But there's usually, when it comes to teens, there's usually a larger motivation on the parental side of things than with the individual themselves, right? When it comes to younger people, you're talking their 20s or so. If they're coming, they're motivated. That's the thing, right? In general, what I observe, based on my observations and my professional opinion, right, I think that what we're seeing with a lot of younger adults is this drive for passion, this drive for following and chasing their dreams and doing for themselves, right? But at the same time, that's a road that can be very challenging and can have a lot of pressure in a sense, right? And I think that that's what older people kind of tend to forget. They forget what it was like to be young. But this younger generation is growing in an era and a time where technology is booming, where social media is booming, right? Where you got content creators, you got influencers, you got all of this out here. Young people are making it, and they're making a lot of money even, right? And that's everything that they're observing. And when you think about somebody who's in that young adult age, the idea or the question that they're always asked is, hey, what are you doing? What are you going to do in the future? What do you want to be? What are you doing with your life right now, right? And that in and of itself, I can tell you, impacts mental health, right? Coming out of the pandemic, what people also don't realize is that a lot of people had a lot of change during the pandemic, where there was a lack of socialization, a lack of connection, right? Typical experiences that would have been stuff to look forward to, or rites of passage, or transitions in each other's life, like prom or graduations.
Those were taken away.
Missed.
Right?
Completely missed
Freshman
that.
year, completely gone. Completely gone. People didn't get a chance to experience those things. And now picture going to college, right? And you walk in and it's your sophomore year, but your sophomore year is your first time on campus. Sophomore year is your first time seeing other students that look like you.
It's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot.
I went through that. I was like, dang, it's crazy. It's crazy.
It's a lot, and I think that that's what a lot of people are now adjusting to, right? So with that, we'll see that there's social anxiety that kind of comes into play. You'll see that anxiety in general is up. Confidence, right? The way people perceive themselves, right? I love freshman year in college, and a lot of young people I work with, I always tell them you got to take advantage of freshman year, because the main two things people are going to ask you freshman year, and it makes it very easy to socialize and make friends, is what's your name, what's your major? Even if you change your major, even if you don't know what you want to do, everybody, oh, I'm undecided. Oh, that's fine. And like, there's no judgment. Everybody's just there to kind of get to know each other. It makes it so easy to approach people and just have a conversation. People during the pandemic did not have that. They didn't have that opportunity. Right now, they're coming in sophomore year, and you're still trying to figure out who you are in general. It's hard, right? So, there's an increase in depression as well. A lot of people were so isolated and so disconnected from folks and from people. Some people were in maybe their homes, right? Where for some, college and leaving the home and going on campus is like an escape, or at least having some sort of a routine as an escape. People were stuck in the house with the same people every day, right? And who knows what home is like? It could be toxic. It could be an unhealthy environment. So now if that's the routine on a daily basis, you can already see coming out of that, what's that going to be like?
And for those 2 years during the pandemic, let's not act like they didn't monetize laziness.
That's real. One thing you talked about was depression and anxiety. So with that, what are like a couple of ways you feel like is a good way to deal with depression or anxiety?
So with depression, right, one of the things is routine, right? I encourage people to really figure out a morning and an evening routine, specifically a morning. And it's based on where you're at. You don't want to tackle both all at once. But just coming up with some sort of a routine that pushes you to move, right? Because what depression often does is it cripples individuals where they want to be in bed all day, they want to be in the house all day, they don't want to go anywhere, they're not motivated to do anything. They're only leaving the house if they have to. They're only showering if they got to, right? Their mood is down, right? But you can still do, right? And that's what I encourage people to at least start with is, hey, let's develop some sort of a routine. What are your interests, right? What do you like to do? What moves you, right? And for some, it might be, okay, I like walking. Okay, cool, go for a walk. Seriously, wake up, go for a walk. First thing, go for a walk. What music y'all listening to, right? Put on that music, put on that album, right? This is like going into technology now, right? Mm-hmm. I got this little speaker in my house, Alexa, right? You could set up routines. Every Friday when I get home, I don't know if my wife set up the routine or if my son did it. But every Friday I get home, nobody's home usually, right? My wife is coming off of work, getting my daughter, and then I pick up my son from school. So I get home, and like every now and then it catches me off guard because I'm not expecting it, but I should at this point. But there's a routine set up on Alexa, and the music is just going. You get in the house, music is blasting. God forbid my wife was home the day before, and she had the speakers on in the house, and she connected it to the speakers. You walk in, and you hear the music like, yo, what's going on, right? But that's just a routine that's set. It's every single Friday. It's like, oh, it's the weekend, and now you've got music playing in the house, right? You could set up a routine just on your smart speaker, right? How do you want to wake up in the morning? What's the sounds you hear, right? What kind of mood does it put you in? What kind of space does it put you in? For some people, it's I want to listen to a podcast, I want to listen to a radio show. For others, it's I want to listen to some music, right? But figuring out what that is, right, as you are as an individual and working that into some sort of a routine. So that's where I would say to start when it comes to like depressed mood or depressed symptoms, right? Not all depressed symptoms means that somebody has major depressive disorder, right? That needs to be tackled in a whole different way. But just feeling in a funk, feeling down, depressed mood, depressed symptoms, rather than letting that funk continue, right? Kind of disrupting it with a little bit of let me figure out if I need to put a morning routine in place or a night routine in place. Some of that's working out, exercise, some of that's reading, walking, biking, hiking, right? But figuring out what to put in. It doesn't have to be super long. There's people out here in the Navy who wake up at 4 a.m. I'm not telling nobody to do that. But figure out something for the routine. As far as anxiety is concerned, I try to encourage people to tackle anxiety, right? Don't try to avoid it. That avoidance of anxiety will increase your anxiety, believe it or not, right? Understand the anxiety. Try to get a better understanding of when does it occur? How does it occur? When do I feel most anxious, right? And now navigate that particular situation. What's something I could do to feel a little bit better? When I was in high school, right, I didn't realize that I was dealing with some anxiety. I went throughout high school, played sports, and then junior year, we had to take a class for 2 marking periods, or semester, I guess was what it's equivalent to. And the class was speech, public speaking, a speech class. The teacher who taught the class taught it at like a college level. It was a very difficult class. She wanted us to write a paragraph for our intros on every speech, draft an outline, and write a paragraph for your conclusion. She wanted you to memorize the intro and the conclusion word for word, and then she wanted you to go through your outline, right? This is the format you had to follow for every single speech. My anxiety was through the roof. I am not a great public speaker. I definitely wasn't when I was in high school. I stuttered a lot, like a lot. And I remember standing at that podium every speech class. My hands were shaking and sweating, and I was just stuttering, and I didn't know what the deal was, right? What I realized was I had to navigate that. And this is me doing this with no guidance, no therapist. There's no school therapist at my school, nothing like that at all. It was really just, you got to figure it out. And for me, my motivation was I wanted to keep playing basketball, because if I couldn't get the grade in the class, I wasn't going to play, right? So I had to figure it out. And one of the things that really, really helped me was deep breathing. I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing, but I started doing it on my own. When I got to school, started studying, and when I in my master's program, I'm realizing, that was anxiety back then. Oh, I did kind of figure it out, right? So breathing is key just to kind of regulate that central nervous system, right? Get you calm, get you back in balance, right? But then navigating what it is. And for me, with public speaking, I realized in addition to just getting up there and taking a couple deep breaths before I start, I had to make sure that the preparation part for all these speeches was on point. I had to make sure that when I had the option to select the topic, I selected the topic that I wanted to talk about because that made it that much easier.
I ain't gonna hold you. I used to have a little anxiety when I was little
I
too.
thought you were a little anxiety, right?
Yeah, I did when I was little, but it was just for like clutch stuff. Like when you was playing video games or something. Like I can literally recall back to one day. Like I was at one of my cousin's house, and we was playing Super Smash or something. And it was just me and my older cousin, and he's way better than all of us. So it was like, all right, I'm here. And it's like, yo, you got 2 lives above him. Like you can beat him. You could beat him. And it doesn't help that, my other 2 cousins is sitting here yelling in my ear, like, yo, yo, yo. So my hands start sweating. I'm shaking the controller. Like, what do I do? What do I do? So I forget, like, my whole method or whatever. But I got over it.
It could be debilitating. It could really take you out and take you off your game. That's the thing. I think that's the part that really catches people is even in moments that you are comfortable and especially like what you're describing. Like, you knew you good. You knew you had it. But now it's like, it's this pressure.
Yeah, this is pressure, but
right?
got over it soon. It was more of like exiting people out of like sidelines. Stay on the sidelines. I got to myself.
Keeping your focus.
Keep focused. Like stay locked in. Once that happened, it was good for me. I was straight ever since then. Love clutch moments.
One thing I want to say, you talked about this earlier. I couldn't ask a question then was you talked about people either going through therapy and like taking like a more talkative way, and then there's people that might take medication. Do you feel that it doesn't matter if you take medication? Because I know some people might be against it, or is it better to, or depending on your situation, that's how you should treat it?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's dependent on the situation, right? There's different mental health diagnoses. A lot of times people hear a lot about depression and anxiety. And oftentimes that's a package deal. You get both. There's actually medication for both. There's medication to treat both. I am not a medication specialist, so I don't try to educate my clients on that. I don't educate the people that I serve on medication, but I do redirect them to people in my network. Hey, this is a psychiatric physician assistant. This is a psychiatrist that I know. There's a psychiatric APN. You should just go to them, just get an evaluation, see what they would recommend, right? And they're able to provide education on medication, right? It's okay to concurrently receive therapy and medication. Medication for certain diagnoses is not just going to be this fix-all kind of thing, right? Some people have a resistance to medication because they don't want to be on medication for the rest of their life. So they're like, I'm not taking no meds.
Oh, I just have a resistance to medication.
People have resistance to medication in general, right?
Not about me on that.
What I could say is that there's certain diagnoses that do require medication, right? You got diagnoses like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, right? Some of the more severe and persistent diagnoses, those require medication on a regular basis, right? And individuals usually will be more receptive to that when they have that education, when they've learned more about their diagnosis, when they've become more self-aware, right? In order to remain compliant with that. And once they are, there's some stabilization, right? But as far as therapy versus medication, it's something that should be done concurrently based on the diagnosis. Every situation is very different. There's been times where maybe somebody needs to be on medication before they start therapy, because for them, they're so depressed that they can't move. They're so depressed that nothing is moving for them. Nothing is changing for them. The idea of getting up, leaving the house, and actually sitting on someone's couch to talk is unachievable, right? So that medication might be the thing to get them over the hump. And then what you realize is as they were in therapy for a year, now that psychiatrist or whoever's prescribing their medication starts to titrate them down decrease the dose, and all of a sudden they're not on medication at all anymore.
One thing I feel like we wanted to ask you, because we don't really, DVD does not get a lot of men who have kids on the episode. I feel like we have a lot of men on, but not a lot of men that have kids. So how is it like to be a father of 2 kids?
Be a father of 2 kids, huh?
2? I'm right, 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started with 1 kid. My son is 5. My daughter is 2. I actually just went to the park with them today. It's kind of crazy because it was just me, my kids, and a couple friends, and their 3 kids. So I think that that's a good representation of what it's like. You gotta have eyes everywhere. You gotta be chasing them. You gotta look after them. Having one of my coworkers that described having 1 child is cool because you could do a zone, not a zone. You could do like a double team on your kid. You got your wife, you got yourself. You're watching the kids. Take care of the kids. Once you have 2 kids, now it's man-to-man defense, and it's a trip. And my daughter is 2. She does a lot. She's all over the place. I think as a man, especially as a black man, there is some pressure to make sure that you are providing, make sure that you are present. Especially me having a son, I try to really be present for my son and teach him the lessons that I can. So there's some pressure, I think, but at the same time, I don't think there's anything that would make me ever change my present. A lot of people seem to be resistant to the idea of becoming a parent or becoming a father, but it's truly life-changing. Being able to look at your son, look at your daughter, see that that's yours, and that you have this place of impact in their life, and they hold you to a high regard. You walk into the house, and it's daddy, 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 and they're running right at you, right? There's nothing else. There's no better feeling than that. But then keeping it real, because I'm gonna keep it 100. On the flip side, there's that idea of I gotta provide for these kids. I gotta protect these kids. I gotta give these kids the best life that I can. Right? So you go to work and you do that, and the experiences aren't just money. I think sometimes people feel like you got to make a whole bunch of money in order to do well by your children, and it's like that's not the case. Sometimes it's really just the time, making sure that you're there to spend time with them, doing movie nights, taking them to the park, playing with them, roughhousing with them, reading to them, right? There's a lot that goes into parenting, especially fatherhood, beyond just providing for your kids monetarily.
What is one thing you felt that you might not have been ready for when you became a father?
Me?
Yeah.
One thing? There's a few things, I guess. But one that sticks out for me is the amount of time that is really required, and the amount of time that they take from you. One of the immediate things when you have a child is they don't go to sleep. So they sleep a lot during the day, but at nighttime when you want to sleep, they want to be up. So that was immediate. Like you lose sleep right then and there. I think more of the lessons that I'm learning now about fatherhood is now that I have my daughter. I learned about my first son. I understand his personality. He's very much an empath. He's very sensitive. And my daughter is basically the complete opposite. She's very adventurous. My son is very cautious. My daughter she's very tough. She has a high pain tolerance. She's just different. But with that, you got to learn to navigate the different types of personalities your kids have. So I'm adjusting my responses, and I'm adjusting the way that I even discipline my children, based on their personalities, based on their temperament, and that's a big challenge that I really wasn't anticipating. I grew up in a house where, you discipline all the kids the same. Like, you beat one, you beat them all, kind of thing. So that's how I grew up. But it's definitely different with my kids, and that's probably one of the major adjustments as well that I think I wasn't necessarily ready for. But truthfully, you're never going to be ready to be a father. You're not going to feel completely ready anyway. But what I can say is that, a lot of people who may feel like they're not built for it, the truth is they are built for it. It's a matter of being able to adjust and adapt. And it's a lot of the skills that we do in our day-to-day life that we're going to be pulling from when we are fathers.
let's end on this question with still talking about kids. So, as a parent, how do you feel that you should deal with like a child that might have a social disorder, maybe like anxiety or depression?
A child having anxiety or depression?
Yeah.
Treat them like a normal kid. Like, it's that simple. Like, no, like literally, like, don't treat them like with kids. If you treat them like they different, they're gonna feel different, and they're gonna feel less than everybody else. Why would you treat them any different? There's no special treatment. Like, I mean, of course, some things are gonna be different, but still. But yeah, you. I just felt like it was a stupid question. But,
Oh dang! God damn.
So there's no such thing as super questions. No such thing, right? I think one of the things, right, is, and we can kind of piggyback off of how I said my son and my daughter are very different, right? You meet your child where they're at, right? You want to be able to observe young people and really approach them in a way that pushes them, right? I personally believe that part of a parent's role in their child's life is to prepare them for the world, prepare them for autonomy, prepare them for independence, not to pass on fear to their children, but to pass on confidence and courage, right? So really affirming them, right? Me and my son, we do words of affirmation. He knows, what is it? I go, I'm strong. He says, I'm strong. I'm courageous. I'm courageous. I have a big, big voice. I have a big, big voice. I do that with him specifically because it really is what he needs, right? I don't think I need to do that with my daughter. She has a big voice. She knows she's strong. She's very courageous. She's very brave, right? So I'm gonna have to figure out when the time is right, what is her needs? What does she specifically need? There's no one size fits all when approaching young people, especially young kids. But even as kids move into adolescence, that's when you really see a lot of that depressed mood and anxiety and everything. Understanding what it is that they really are feeling. It's hard to put into words. A lot of it is impacted by their social surroundings, right? There's this natural desire as an adolescent to
fit in.
Exactly, to fit in, to want to belong to something. If they feel like they're the oddball out, that could be a major contributor to why they appear to have this type of mood they have, right?
don't treat them different.
Treat them based on their needs is how I would put it,
That's what I.
right?
That's
I
what
think
said.
I think sometimes
I added
people
at the end, of course, there's gonna be some differences, but don't treat them like Cause
I'm
like,
not saying
it's not like a kid with like say like a physical disability. Like you treat them different, but it's not like they're gonna be literally the list of things that they're gonna be is cut in half or about 75%.
But I mean, like there might be certain things you might need to add on, like what you said with the affirmation for
No,
yourself.
yeah,
Like,
but I'm saying with like a kid with anxiety or depression, you start treating him like he's some weird ass kid. Of course,
No, I'm not saying that.
That's how I felt when you said the question.
I think something to kind of note is that sometimes when we're using these kind of words and diagnoses for individuals, it becomes a badge for them. Think about how many people are, I'm a survivor of this or I'm a this, that. Especially in this day and age in social media, you could self-proclaim anything you want, right? So it's important to identify the symptoms, identify what someone sees rather than a diagnosis, right? There's no need to try to put a diagnosis on everything that is seen. Mental health is so broad, right? Everybody could benefit from therapy. Everybody could benefit from some sort of routine or some sort of a mental health. Let me rephrase it, right? Mental well-being, right? If you prioritize your own mental well-being, right? There's a lot of improvement you'll see in other areas in your life. And I think everybody could benefit from that. That's why there's no need to label everything, right? Somebody could be experiencing some anxiety, and it's okay. Well, this is what I saw though, because what did you see? What made you think the person was experiencing anxiety? Well, their hands were shaking. They seemed to be sweating, right? This person is depressed. Well, what made you think that they were depressed? They were isolating, right? So all right, so let's address isolation. Why is that person sitting all alone? Why is that person sitting in the cafeteria at the lunch table by themselves? Why does that person avoid going to school? Let's address the behavior.
That's literally what I did when I got forced into anger management during high school. That's literally what I did. Like getting put in anger management, and they just treated me like there was something wrong with me. I immediately was just like, don't fuck with this. I don't want to be around people. I'm like, this is making me more upset because now I'm getting treated like I'm a weird kid.
Yeah. That's where that comes from for you. I think that's exactly why you have that passion behind your response to that, because you're absolutely right. No one should be labeled in a way that is now causing everyone to now approach them. Because picture that, right? If they said, oh, K is that's the anger guy. That's that guy you don't want to mess with. He's angry, right? Then automatically, right? Picture the teachers in the teachers' lounge. They talking like, oh my God, K this week he's been right. So the teacher that got you next period is gonna come up to you like, oh, here you go, K, right? They're gonna approach you so subtly and so carefully, off of what someone else told them, as opposed to let me actually sit down and actually talk to this kid. Let me actually sit down and actually try to figure out what's going on. How does this person actually feel? You see what I'm saying? And it's better to approach somebody with that kind of reality than to base it on assumption or base it on a label or a diagnosis. Because just because somebody struggles with anxiety or somebody struggles with depression, struggles with anger, doesn't make them a depressed person 100% of the time. Doesn't make them an angry person 100% of the time. Something really important that we try to do in our mental health is use person first language, right? Where it's a person. It's not necessarily their diagnosis. You don't want to look at that person and say they're a schizophrenic. No, that's somebody who has schizophrenia. But they're a somebody first. They got a name. You know what I'm saying? And you approach that person that way. You approach them as the person first, not by a label, not by a title, not by a diagnosis.
That's how I be moving. That's how I be moving when I'm genuine, you know. I be, you know.
Like he's trying to get shots at someone. I don't know.
Oh, me?
Him,
Oh, him?
bro.
I be moving like that.
Trying to say.
Generosity. You know?
Generosity.
I'm nice to everybody. You know what I'm saying?
You got to be courteous. Got to be compassionate. You know, to the people around you.
Very compassionate. I'm a very compassionate fellow. I've been like that for a minute.
Okay. So that's how you want to put it.
I'm not compassionate.
No,
I
didn't
feel
say
like
that.
I spent a lot, especially at the beginning questions. I spent a lot of this just listening.
It's nice.
It's nice. It's nice just to sit back and listen to him speak, and I actually learned a lot about myself because I realized that I had anxiety, but I didn't know where it came. But it usually comes coupled with my anger. Like when I get mad, I get anxious, but I don't know why I really get anxious.
Yeah, I think that's for a lot of us black men. We don't know necessarily how to channel our anger. We don't know how to regulate what we're actually feeling because we're not taught that. And most of the time when we do express anger, our anger is usually masking another emotion.
Yeah.
And we've never been validated in what that other emotion is, nor have we ever been allowed to just express that other emotion. If you walked into a room and you saw a woman sitting at the table, her head down, she's crying, what is your reaction? What is your response? Right?
Like,
Yo, I'm hanging up with
what's
Ted
going
too
on?
much, bro.
Like,
What's going on?
What happened?
Exactly. What happened?
Yeah.
What's
I've been
going
hanging up
on?
with Tan too much, bro.
That's
But
I'm gonna ask you what's going. If I, yeah, I'll be like, what's going on? What happened?
right, naturally somebody's probably gonna be like, oh, they feel some sort of compassion for the individual. They want to try to help.
Yeah.
Right. But now if this was a man sitting at a table, you walk into a room sitting at a
think he's
table, the man
weird.
is bawling his eyes out, he's crying.
think something's wrong with him.
See what I'm saying?
I see that all the time though. Like,
Yeah.
Right? And it's very rare that somebody's going to sit, oh, what's going on? You're going to sit down next to them and have a conversation. No. Most of the time you're looking at this person like, what's wrong with him? And let it be a black man crying.
I helped a homeless person one day when I was coming home from work. Like he was going up to everybody. Like he wasn't asking for no money. He just wanted food. But because like he looked all messed up and like it was winter, so it was extra cold. He didn't have a real comfortable jacket on, so he got snot and stuff running out of his mouth, and he just asking people for food. They're all walking away, looking at him like he nasty, disgusting. I'm like, yo, he's a homeless. You can literally see his sleeping bag right there. So I kind of do regret it because I was hungry, but I gave him my sandwich and I just had a conversation with him.
But that's what it takes. I think that a lot of times people are so quick to see, but people don't just want to be seen. They want to be heard as well. Right? So if you're with someone, if you see someone, right, don't just see them, don't just observe them, but try to listen to what they have to say. Right? Try to listen to what it is they have to share, what is their story. I used to go to grad school in New York, and I used to take the train. And I have a cousin of mine who's the same age as me. He was in the theological school. I was in the counseling school, went to the same school. And I remember we were racing back to the train station because if we miss our train, we're going to have to wait a whole hour for the next train to come to bring us home. And I remember we're running through the Penn Station in New York to try to make it so we can catch this train. And this guy, he's in much better shape than me. He runs really fast. The guy is like, he was dunking when he was like in 8th grade. I don't know. This guy was like just a freak of nature, right? Does parkour. But my cousin disappeared. I'm like, where's my cousin? Where is he? And I look, and he's talking to some homeless woman. I'm like, well, we got to catch a train. Like, what are you doing? And then I see him pull a bag out of his bag. He gives it to her. And thankfully, we made it on the train. And I asked him, we had a conversation. I said, what's going on? Like, who's that? He knew her name. He knew her whole story. I was just like, oh, her house caught on fire. She's been here for years. She got no family, this, that, and the third. Her family says some family lives out of state, but nobody local. I said, you learn all this about this person? He said, yeah, I always pack an extra sandwich to give to her when I come to class. I said, oh, that's wild. Right, but that's intention. And I think that that's what we lack when it comes to mental health, right? I think the stigma, there's been a lot of success when it comes to destigmatizing mental health, but there's still a lot of work to do. And just the day-to-day, we have to be more compassionate. We have to be more willing to listen to people, hear their stories. We see them, we observe them, but now let's actually listen to what they have to say.
No. I didn't mean to lie, bro. I be hanging up with Ted too much. Oh, my goodness. But nah, I understand that. Like, never been the type of person. If I see anybody crying, like, yo,
You good?
you good?
Like-
And I'll sit down, I'll talk to them, but that's the type of person I am. But if I'm with 10 and 10 starts laughing, his laugh is going to make me want to laugh.
Some
But-
people just bring dark humor to some things. I don't need it. Time being that
But
person.
after I finish laughing, I'm going to go sit down with you and talk. But I guess that's how we going to wrap up the episode with a 10, like mention, a 10 Easter egg or whatever the case may be. B, thank you for coming on to the episode.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to be here.
Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up completely?
Nah, when it comes to self, I know we kind of started with like self-appraisal. How do you self-diagnose, right? When it comes to self, what I can share, what challenge I would give people, individuals, is just try to show some compassion, try to show some love to yourself. Oftentimes, we don't realize how much we beat our own selves up, right? We tend to naturally show more compassion to people around us, right? Somebody might be like, oh, I'm so bad at this, or I don't know how to do. And you're like, nah, you're actually pretty good at this, or nah, you're not that fat, or nah, you're not that crazy, you're not, right? We always tend to respond to people's like negative self-talk to give them some sense of encouragement. But how often do we really kill ourselves with the way we speak, right? How often are we really beating ourselves up, right? So if there's any challenge, anything I would leave y'all with, it's really just, don't focus on self-diagnosing. Don't focus on any of that, but really focus on loving yourself. Focus on showing yourself a little bit more compassion. The same compassion that you would give to other people, give it to yourself as well, because you deserve it.
And on that note, that has been another episode of Season 4 DVD. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember, keep getting your friends to like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Keep buying your fall merch because it's getting a little cold out there. It's getting a little chilly.
Chitty.
A little chilly. And until next time, stay different by the fall DVD. You know me. Be ready.
Run it up, run it up, run it up, run it up. Whole lot of money in the tuck, tryna double up. I ain't in the lane with nobody, I'm on some other stuff. Black tinted windows, we pull up.